Hey guys, how are you doing? Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us for another Social Plus webinar. Super excited for this one today because we have joining us Malhar, who is the founder of Gravity and has actually had a lot of experience working in the health tech space. Um, Malhar, your background is a little bit, across the board with Strava, with Peloton, etc. I'd love to learn a little bit more from you, have you share a bit about, what it is that you do, and maybe we can start from there.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thanks so much. Really excited to be here. Hey everyone, I'm Malhar, currently the founder of Gravity, which is a new startup in the health and wellness space, mindfulness space. Um, and before that, I spent time, as Advi mentioned, at Whoop, building AI products. I've also spent time at Strava and Peloton, also in product, and then have built a few businesses before that, some of which have failed miserably. So we can dive into those as well.
Happy to do that. Happy to discuss all of that today and learn a lot from you and from your experiences. I think, there's a lot of patterns across health tech, right? That are, one can say, are true for most companies, uh, as well as yourself. Gravity itself, I know, is a little bit different from your previous experiences, right? From Strava, Whoop, Peloton, but I'm sure there's learnings from there that are applicable and can be applied as well. I mean, just to kick us off, I mean, I'd love to learn a little bit more about Gravity. Maybe you can tell me a bit about what Gravity does and how it is that you are reimagining mental health wellness in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think just to connect the thread, it's like a lot of what I've spent my time in is consumer health. And so Gravity is like, I'm really excited because Gravity is a direct extension of that and what I care about a lot. And Gravity is a space for meditative journaling. We blend immersive audio meditations with a reflective journaling practice. And the idea is that you explore these fresh ideas that spark inner conversation. Um, I'd say the best way to describe it is there's a quote by Naval Ravikant that says, "The best meditation is being genuinely curious about the contents of your own mind." And I think that's really true. There's a lot of meditation apps out there. There's a lot of ways to practice mindfulness, whether it's yoga, breath work, you name it, and those are all effective. Um, but what I really want to create was something where you're not just consuming, but you're actually creating. And so on Gravity, we have these really short, punchy audio meditations that are always less than 2 minutes. They cover timeless concepts and modern wisdom. And we pair those with a reflective journaling practice so that you actually apply these concepts to your life and you're not just consuming information.
Yeah.
And at the end of that practice, hopefully, you're one step closer to taking action or to improving your life in whatever way you wanted to when you first started the session. So that's kind of the premise of Gravity. And we've been in beta for the past couple of months and looking to launch in the next few days, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, super excited for that. I know I've signed up for the beta myself, but I'm super excited for the launch and to check it out. It's really cool that you bring that up, because oftentimes in most systems that we put in place, whether it be in work, in different sectors, etc., one's always also putting in feedback loops. And essentially that's kind of what you're imagining in a way, right? It's like you need to have your own feedback loop for yourself after you're doing these meditative practices. A lot of them are thinking that it's beneficial, but maybe if you're not actually putting your mind to where it's helping you and what it's actually benefiting you in and realizing that, maybe that's something that you're not actually gonna register as easily as if you are being reflective,
Totally. Yeah, there's like this quote: "Good friends consume together, great friends create together." Like I think a lot of the best things happen when you're putting things out there in the world, and journaling is a known practice that has various health benefits. And so trying to make that more engaging and introduce a refreshing approach to that with Gravity.
Okay, awesome. I think that sounds super promising. I'm excited to try it out. Um, I'm curious though. I mean, right now, obviously, this is going to be the first version of your app, and as you build it out, there's going to be like a roadmap of where you see it going. Um, I'm sure when it comes to this, a lot of what you'll be drawing on is your past experiences, right? I'd love to just touch upon that a little bit. Like maybe you could share a bit about what your role was in Strava, what you worked on in Peloton, what you did in Whoop, like, and and maybe after that we can kind of summarize and understand across the three, what are maybe some key, pillars of building a successful health and wellness app.
Yeah, totally. Um, for sure. I guess let's start with Whoop because that was the most recent experience.
Yeah.
Um, I spent time at Whoop. I was brought on to uh, work on special projects, just new initiatives, new products, and we're dabbling in different areas, trying to figure out what might work best and what was a new bet we could take, and ultimately landed on Whoop Coach, which was Whoop's AI initiative. Um, and that product experience was allowing people to have a conversation with their data and understand insights from their Whoop data. Also, just to flag for anyone who hasn't used Whoop or seen Whoop before, Whoop is a wearable device that collects a variety of health biomarkers 24/7. So you can wear it on your wrist, your bicep, whatever, and it's a health monitor. And so it's collecting data 24/7, and there's a lot that you can do with it. It provides a lot of insights throughout the app. But with Whoop Coach, the idea was how can we use AI and these emerging LLM technologies to consolidate that data, provide refreshing insights that are more dynamic, that we couldn't necessarily provide across the app elsewhere. And so I was on the product side, helping build that feature out. It was our biggest launch at the time. And yeah, I learned a lot about building AI products, building with RAGs systems, LLMs, and all that stuff. But actually, I'd say the biggest learnings are on the consumer side, which is how do consumers engage with LLMs? What are their friction points? What do they want to see? And some of the key insights were people don't want to ask the question. Like on ChatGPT, when you type in a question, you get an answer. On a product like Whoop, where it actively surfaces insights and recommendations, this was sort of like a flip. It's like you had to ask for insights and recommendations. And that was kind of, it was different than the experience that people had on Whoop. And so we had to figure out how to lower the barrier to insight, so to say. And you could do that through providing dynamic suggestions, suggested prompts that people could ask. And then eventually the V2 of Whoop Coach became, how do we surface insights proactively? So you don't even have to ask anything. Every morning we'll surface some insights for you in the morning. And so that was a good learning, and yeah, spent a lot of time crafting that experience for users. And so yeah, that was predominantly what I spent my time on at Whoop was AI products and trying to make sure they resonate with the member base.
Nice, very cool. And then your time, I know, at Strava was also majorly focused on, a lot of different areas, but I know you touched on social and community aspects of it as well. I'm curious, AI, of course, for sure, is something that's beneficial, and I'm excited to see how you plan on implementing it in Gravity eventually. But also, I'm curious, like, what are other pillars that you saw, right? AI is a relatively new pillar versus things that have been driving engagement, retention, time in app over the course of, let's say, the last few years, and what you think might be, let's say, evergreen features, right? Or evergreen capabilities that will always be there for these sort of apps in order to help grow them. I know personally, with all of the sort of fitness brands, wellness brands that we work with, we see the ability for users to talk to each other or share with each other their activities or their progress in their, let's say, health journey has been pivotal when it comes to really long-lasting engagement from these users, right?
Yeah.
And just to keep them coming back. But I'd love to hear your view on it based on your experience as well.
Yeah, totally. I think you kind of you nailed it. Community is one of the most timeless pillars of any product, and I spent my time at Strava on the community team, and so learned a lot about how they think about it, because Strava is primarily a community product. It's a social product.
Yeah.
So everything that they build relies around social features, engagement, community engagement, and yeah, I'd say there's a lot of interesting things I learned, particularly at Strava, about community. One is that community it goes hand in hand with storytelling. the reason that people are in a community is because they share some sense of ideas, they share stories with each other. There's a common bond that's tied, and I think a lot of that happens through storytelling. And when you think about that digitally, because we're no longer only existing in these in-person communities, how do you build a feed on Strava that allows people to share their activities in ways that tell a beautiful story about what they're doing with the people that matter to them most? Um, how do you get them to show up in real life and interact with their community? So a lot of what Strava is investing in recently is, their groups feature, and riding the run club craze, and trying to increase offline engagement through online engagement.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of power in that. And I think when I was at Strava, one of the things I worked on was they introduced video on Strava for the first time, which might not seem like a big deal. Like every social product allows you to post videos, but for
Yeah.
Strava, this was the first time you could do that. And what that did was it took a lot of the static pieces of Strava, just the maps of the activities that you'd see, the photos that people would post with them, to more dynamic, creative storytelling product. And so a lot of the top influencers were now adding extra color to their activities using video. And so it was another storytelling lever. And I think that was really important to build community, to help, there's a lot of people who have big YouTube presences who
Yeah.
also use Strava, but how do you bring that kind of storytelling onto Strava? So yeah, I'd say the thread is storytelling is community. And so when you're trying to build features that bolster community, you want to think about how do you help people share more things and also learn more things from the people that they care about.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And I think you've made a really cool point that like changing from just text or image static capability to having more video capabilities, that's actually a pattern that we've been seeing recently too, right? From our clients, predominantly those that were using chat or that are leveraging social. Now a lot of them are evolving and leveraging like our short form video capabilities, right?
Totally.
Because when you have a certain level of engagement that happens when you have a normal static community, and it's really at some point you do challenges, you do campaigns, you pull a bunch of different levers in order to have that engagement go through the roof. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point it reaches a sort of plateau or a roof threshold, right? Especially when you have limited capabilities or functionalities, and it's only, I think, after that, after you're able to implement video, that it kind of gives you that additional boost that you need in order to make it as interactive as possible and make it feel
Mm-hmm.
as genuine and live as possible, if anything, right?
Totally.
Yeah. But I think that is
Totally.
super, super cool, super interesting. I think when it comes to how Strava does it, also, it's what you mentioned is really interesting of like running clubs, right? I see like all the time, like I have a few friends that are part of Midnight Runners Club, which is like all around different cities around the world. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the other key that is super interesting is for how do you create omni-channel experiences, right? And maybe in some cases it's easier when you are a retailer who has retail outlets as well. Like, with Ulta Beauty, we're working to see like how do we have their community that we're helping to create, but we're seeing how do we translate that to create these sort of omni-channel experiences where you're in the store and you're getting rewards for your community, or you're taking community actions and then getting rewards that you can leverage in store, right? And kind of
Right.
building that sort of relationship. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Strava has done that really well without having a physical product, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's so wild to me, which is they everyone knows Strava, everyone knows the color, the orange color that Strava is tied to, but they don't have any physical asset that they sell, or that people engage with, which is that's really, it's really telling that they've done a good job of building
A
community.
powerful community, a very,
Exactly.
very powerful community that translates online and offline, both ways.
Totally.
I think
Yeah.
that's super cool. I'm really curious, what do you think in terms of, engagement retention sort of strategies? Like clearly for them, this is one lever in sort of helping to boost that engagement and make sure that people are retained, because I've like countless times I've heard stories from people, but a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, even clients that I have conversations with, somehow it often goes to this subject, and in the end, a bunch of people end up telling me, "Oh yeah, I started using Strava during COVID, and you know what? I found some of my best friends through that now because
Yeah,
like, we go running together, we do this, and like now Strava for that user base is almost all but guaranteed that they will be a loyal user base moving forward, right? For those
yeah,
people who have built such deep and genuine connections because of their app and because of
totally.
their community. So what do you see as other like useful strategies for in health and wellness space? It could be physical like Strava, it could be mental health like Gravity, but what do you see as best, let's say, engagement and retention strategies? Do you think that this is product led? Do you think it's campaign led? Do you think it's a hybrid model? And where do you think the best practices lie?
Totally. That it's a great question. And I hate to give you the cop out answer, but I think it's probably a hybrid. I think on the product side, product led engagement and retention optimization, I think a lot of that comes from personalization. Um, and so, learned that at Whoop a lot. How do you deeply personalize the experience? Um, how do you make it so every day that people wake up and use your product, they're seeing something new and refreshing that's largely about themselves first, because people love themselves, we're all selfish, but then also like attaching that community layer on top of it, because once you learn what you need to learn about yourself for the day as it relates to your health and wellness, you want to see what other people are doing. And that's oftentimes more dynamic what other people are doing on a given day. So I think personalization is really important, connecting people to people that they might find interesting. Um, One of the things that we found on Whoop was when we launched Whoop Coach, there was this embedded feature inside Whoop Coach, which was if you asked, how does your data compare to other people, called it members like you, that was a feature name, uh, we would we would basically assess how do a variety of your metrics on average compared to members like you in your population. So around the same age demographic, gender demographic, all that stuff. And people love that because competition matters and people want to see how they stack up to other people. But again, that's a personalization lever. You're seeing how you compare to other people like you. So that was really helpful. I think just on the retention side, you can't miss push notifications. And there's something I learned from Duolingo, which was they they're obviously great at retention. Duolingo is best in class,
For sure.
and um, I heard that they do this. I don't know if they still do it, but they time their push notifications to be adaptive so that it's always 24 hours after the last time a user completed a session, and so it's kind of like this moving average of push notification times versus like a static remind me at this time each morning.
Yeah.
And so we actually switched to that on Gravity, and we recently did. So I've yet to see the impact of it, but already like it's just so much more engaging because it feels like it's personalized to your schedule. Um,
Correct.
for a week, if you're going to switch your practice to the nighttime, then you want push notifications to adapt to that automatically without you having to tell it that. So that's been an impactful retention strategy. But going back to this idea of it being hybrid, that's product led. I think the hybrid approach is even more powerful, which is how do you get people to show up in real life
Yeah.
and have that bond, have that community tie related to your product? Um, on the West Coast, there's a startup I'm a fan of called Open, and they have a meditation app, but they also have an in-person studio. You're nodding your head. You definitely
I use Open. I'm a big fan. Yeah, for sure.
it's awesome, and they have the in-person studio model, and I think that's just such a powerful ecosystem because you have like this connection. It's like you go to the in-person class and then you also download the app, or you use the app and then when you're in LA, you stop by at their breathwork class. And it's just a really powerful way to build community, to build retention in person because you're interacting with people.
Yeah.
Um, and on the East Coast, there's Othership, which is like uh, the sauna and ice bath sort of class, and that's blowing up recently. Um, and they also have an app. And so I think like this duality of having a digital product and a physical product, or physical experience, I should say,
Yeah.
um, is really impactful. And I'm trying to think about what that looks like for Gravity. We're so early that I mean it's a good place because now you can dream anything up and it could sound cool. But I think the in-person component is huge for engagement and retention. And you often don't see that in the data. Like how is this impacting those two?
Yeah.
But I think just for building brand awareness and for creating like a cult-like community, it's super impactful.
Fair. I mean, like you're saying, imagining where gravity can go. I think we discussed this, we touched upon this earlier in a different call, but um, the idea is obviously offline is you can imagine where it would go. Initially, even online, like the way you guys are launching the app right now, I'd say like you mentioned before, it's a single player app in a way, right? And taking it
Totally.
from that and making it maybe more of a multiplayer app, I'd love to understand like what's your given your experience, right? And given all of your learnings, because you're doing this now for your own business, based on what you've learned, what do you see as the path there? What do you see as like your steps or roadmap? Obviously, not fully like fledged, but like in high level thinking, what do you think? How would you lay it out?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I think it falls into three different steps. We're on step one right now, the vision, which is prove the hypothesis around this new mindfulness experience, which is immersive audio meditations with a reflective journaling practice, and prove that that's engaging and that people are seeing that's impactful. And so that's what we're focusing on. That's what we're launching with. Um, and then I'd say V2 of that is how do we get people to go? How do we get them to go deeper per experience, per session, per app open? So right now we're building out this breadth. We're building out this breadth of content, meditation sessions.
Yeah,
But in V2, I think what it looks like is when people engage with a session, how do we get them to go deeper, extract the most value that they can? And I hate to say it, but I think AI probably has a big it probably has a big impact there, just because
for
it
sure.
helps people have this constant feedback loop. The AI can become this meditative sparring partner, so to say, as people are journaling and reflecting, um, and helps them go deeper. It's kind of like a live therapy session, so to
Life
say.
therapist. Yeah, I was about to say therapist in my head.
Exactly.
You
You
still have
get it.
that.
Yeah. Um, and so that's kind of V2, and I think that gets really exciting because it becomes more of a dynamic experience. And then V3, and this is the one that we can riff on live, which is how do we build this experience so that people can do it together, and with a community focus. And how do you open the aperture of what Gravity is? It's not just this uh, meditative journaling experience, but it's actually a brand. It's a community. It happens with other people. Um, we're bringing in some of the leading health and wellness thought leaders, and having them create content with us. That's a lever of community for sure. How are we bringing this in person? What does that look like? What does an in-person Gravity experience look like? Um, and so I'm trying to figure that out right now. I think um, there's a lot of ways we could take this. I think
Yeah.
um, a lot of it's focused on uh, how do you bring people together, and how do you engage in a wellness experience that benefits people together. So that's kind of the V3 of this. And along the way, though, I think there's a couple community features that we will introduce. A lot of people have asked for. We have this meditation on gratitude, and so people will write, listen to that meditation, and then write a gratitude journal entry. And they're like, "Hey, I want to send this to the person that I wrote this about." Like,
Yeah.
and that creates this sort of shareability. It creates this two-way conversation. And so starting to introduce those kinds of aspects along the way, I think, will help us get to V3.
Yeah, when you were just talking about V3, that's what I was imagining in my head also. Is like maybe even being able to select excerpts of my journal to share with the broader public or share with the rest of the Gravity community, just for me to either, it's a good thing and I want to be like proud of myself and like share something that I've accomplished, or maybe it's something that like I feel bad about, horrible about, and I would love some support or some, someone who's been in a similar situation to maybe share some sort of advice. And I think it's definitely something to think about. And, I think it ties very well to a question that Brendan actually has shared in chat. Brendan says he's curious if we have a perspective on the power of social pressure, right? So perhaps through the lens of a newbie versus experienced members in these sort of both health and wellness apps, I guess, as well as communities and health and wellness apps, the
Mhm.
positivity of accountability and visibility, community, but then compared to the fear and negativity of fear, imposter syndrome, alienation.
Wow, that is such a good question. Yeah, I feel like as I'm reading them, like, don't we all struggle with this? This is so hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, I think, yeah, I don't think there's a singular answer to that because, I mean, on every social product, you both benefit greatly and then you can also be harmed greatly.
Yeah,
And a lot of what I think about uh, is the feature, is the experience providing more than it's taking from its users. Um, and so, like, you think about any social product you use, any community social experience that you have, um, there's tons of benefits, but the second it starts to take more than it gives, you probably want to stop doing it. And so I think, I mean, at least when it relates to mental health, um, it's quite contradictory, right? A lot of the feelings that you feel are personal, and only you know them in the highest fidelity, and only you will ever know that, because no
yeah,
one can read your brain and um, feel your biology and all that stuff. It's like only you will feel that. But at the same time, there's a connection that can happen with other people when the same threads of what you're going through are relatable to other people, and you can resonate with their experience, even though if it's not the exact high fidelity feeling. And so there's this duality that I think it's really important to touch on. And in the grand scheme of things, I think mental health benefits greatly from sharing with other people. That's why therapy is proven to work. And um, a tool like Gravity, where it's single player today, is a form of self-regulation where you're kind of doing it on your own. But when we bring that into a more community-focused lens, the question will be, how do you protect anonymity when it comes into play, and
yeah.
um, making sure that people feel safe to share their thoughts and feelings. So there's a lot of protection that needs to happen
Sure.
before this becomes multiplayer. And that's why you've seen like the Headspaces and Calms of the world. They're not community focused yet, and they're some of the biggest wellness apps. So it's a really hard issue to tackle.
Yeah. To be fair, Headspace is actually moving towards community.
I
Uh,
saw that clip the other day.
like we just had a webinar with them like a couple weeks ago, and it's great to see them heading that way. I think I also, like, from my perspective, there's a number of factors here, right? Like, one, there's the idea of the social pressure of actually posting, right, or contributing to the community. I don't think one needs to do that. If in fact majority of social communities are made up of people who are lurkers, people who are just digesting content, right? Oftentimes I might wake up in the morning and not be motivated to go work out, but if I'm opening up my, let's say, my Noom app or some other health and fitness app that I'm using, and I see someone else posting about their Monday morning workout, maybe that's the motivation that drives me to go do my thing, right? um to the second point of, like, the safety of community and how comfortable you are with what you're sharing, I think moderation plays a huge factor in this. um on bigger social media networks, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world, it's kind of impossible. And that's there's so much hate, there's so much trolling. That's kind of why we do what we do also, in terms of trying to build these smaller communities that are micro communities that are more authentic. I think having the right tools in terms of moderation, and this is something, I only know because we've been working with clients over this for like the last year and a half, 2 years, and making our moderation so much stronger. But now that it is where it's at, and especially with AI and leveraging that for moderation, now it has become so much easier from that perspective. And
Right.
then the last point I'll do is the point that you said about anonymity, right? And it's super clear. And having that flexibility, I think, is important and something that one can easily offer, right? Uh, Not exactly in the health and wellness space, but we have a client named Your Juno, and they're in the financial literacy and education space. So they
Mhm.
have an app for women and non-binary folks in order to take lessons and learn about financial decisions, how to make them, where to make them. But then in their community section, what's cool is they allow the user to either post as themselves, or a user can post anonymously, right? Because there are certain, even in finance, there's certain topics. Maybe you're in debt, maybe you took a bad loan and you went, and you want to get people's advice. You also are embarrassed a little and ashamed, and you don't want to expose yourself out as much there. So I think giving people that flexibility is also very huge when it comes to this.
Totally. Yeah, I've seen so many wellness startups fixate on that exact premise. Like that was their value prop, that's anonymous, talk spaces. And those obviously did really well in COVID. Um, but yeah, it's super important pillar of mental health.
All right, since we're on this question train, I'm just gonna go to Laura has a quick question for us as well. Thank you, Brendan. That was actually a great question as well. Laura's asking, how do you view the relationship between shared knowledge and lived experience, right? Particularly in the context of community-based health literacy initiatives.
How do you...
What is
That's a
applicable to one might not be applicable to all, right? So like where do you draw the line? What's the relationship there between my journey versus our journey versus us as a collective and our learning?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I'll speak for the content that we create on Gravity, which is a lot of it is intended to be timeless, modern wisdom that everyone can feel in some respect. And we make it a really strong point not to go too deep on specific experiences, as if to sort of like make the content too niche. And so as we're doing this content writing, as we're writing these scripts, creating these meditations, a lot of what we're focused on is, the shared experience of being a human. Like they're core tenets that we all feel.
Yes.
Whether shared, lived, these are all things that we can feel and we've heard of, and that we've dealt with before, we've seen others deal with before. And that's kind of the thread that I like to pull on in the content that we create on Gravity. And I think like there's something really powerful about that, because I mean, some of the comments and feedback we've gotten was, I've heard of this, but I never really thought about it in that way. So taking these timeless concepts, slightly reframing them, I think opens the aperture of people that can relate to it. So yeah, I'd say on Gravity, we focus on the timeless and try not to draw too much of a line between either. Because we're trying to go for broader application, things that everyone has felt before.
Makes sense. Nice. I think it's also very dependent on the use case, right? And how you're trying to implement. For you guys, it makes like complete sense. And yes, I think it's just having the range of both of them in a way, right? Because you will always have evergreen content, evergreen knowledge that needs to be there, that it will always be applicable, right? And will be timeless in the way that you're saying. And then you kind of take that, and each of us has our own personal experiences from our own perception, and that kind of shapes the way we even look at that shared knowledge or apply that shared knowledge for us, right? And so at the end, and I think it's cool, Laura, that you touched upon that, because at the end of the day, that kind of really ties it back into what Gravity is doing in a way, right? Like you are attempting to start you off at a starting point that is very much applicable to everyone, but then by actively getting you to reflect on it, take notes on it, write down and journal about it, you're getting them to, hey, how does this relate to your personal experience?
I think I just lost you for a second, Advi.
Yeah. And I was saying, I think the version 3 that you were talking about is interesting from that perspective, because it's like you go from the broad into the focused and narrow, but then you take it back out to the broad by saying, hey, this is my personal lived experience, and I'm putting it out there again of how I perceived it in order for it to be part of that shared knowledge, to see if other people are of a similar type, right? And if other people can relate to the same thing. So I think it's a
Correct.
very
Yeah.
like interesting ebb and flow that goes on between it over time.
Exactly. Wow, you just nailed our product strategy. You're hired.
Let me let my CEO know real quick. But
No, you nailed it. That was awesome. Yeah.
awesome. No, okay. I think that is super interesting, super cool. Okay. One thing we didn't touch upon as of yet, which I mean, given the time we have left limited, I would love to touch upon real quick, is the idea of AI, right?
Yeah.
you shared a bit about, Whoop and how like you helped build the AI there. And I really love the idea that you were saying of, proactively surfacing insights.
Yes.
I'm curious though, where do you see it adding genuine value for you in your product? Because everybody's doing AI nowadays. Everyone is trying to add AI nowadays. I
Yes.
personally, like, even internally, I'm an advocate for, like, let's not do AI for the sake of doing AI. Let's make sure that we're doing AI that actually is value generation. Because
Right.
realistically, honestly, AI has been happening for years. Machine learning has been happening for years. It's really
Totally.
like in data analysis, it's been used forever, right?
Right.
It's just a
Right.
matter of now that we have the ability to understand context
Mhm.
really well through LLMs. I think, at least from my personal experience in social and in community, it has blown the door wide open in terms of really understanding my users, right? And
Yes.
really being able to hyper personalize stuff at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, where do you see that playing a role for you and in
Yeah.
health in general?
I think you nailed it. It's a great lever for personalization. Um, and I mean, I'll start up top by saying anything new that you want to introduce should be value accretive. And um, I take that even a step further by saying a lot of what we do in technology is to help people show up better in real life. Um, not to be better on their phones or in the
Like,
metaverse, or until we get to the metaverse,
that's
maybe then. But
yeah, that's
but but
debatable for different
but
people.
but the idea is, how do we build experiences digitally so that they can show up better in real life? And I think AI is really interesting in the context of gravity and wellness because health and wellness always benefit greatly from the amount of data that it has. Whoop is awesome because it collects data 24/7, and the question then becomes, what can you do with this data now using AI to process it and have a conversation around it and turn that into natural syntax? Um, on gravity, it's really fitting because gravity is it's text, it's journal that you're writing, and LLMs are really good at that. That's what they're built for. And so there's so many cool things that you could do around personalization. Um, you know, closing that feedback loop so that when people want to have this back and forth dynamic conversation, that can happen without having to wait for a therapist, which we know, the time from booking a session to actually having that conversation with a therapist, it's really long. So having this dynamic conversation benefits greatly from implementing LLMs. And like you said, context, that's super huge. The beauty of an LLM in the context of a journal, at least, is it knows everything about you. Imagine talking to yourself from when you're 5 years old and you had a journal back then. If you did that would be like that's a life experience you couldn't have imagined, but it is now possible because granted that you have been journaling and there's all this writing, the LLM can parse through that and it has all the context about you. It knows you possibly better than you know yourself because the
That's,
fact is that most people journal and then they close the journal and it gets put away.
yeah,
And until they revisit those memories or that writing, they'll never, pluck those threads and reimagine that. But the LLM has a really good capacity to pull out the right threads and memories and resurface things. It has all the context. So I think the vision to implement AI is huge for Gravity.
fair.
And again, I want it to always tie back to helping people show up better in real life. And
Yeah,
so the more that they can go deeper using AI, have this dynamic conversation, it improves their self awareness. They find more clarity in their lives, and they show up as a better person.
that's so fair. I love that idea. I'm unfortunately not one of those kids that kept a steady journal, but if anybody watching it was one of those people, go to your attic or your basement, wherever they are, find them and put them all into an LLM and like see what sort of insights you get. It could be quite useful. I think that is actually
100%.
awesome. And if you are someone who is now journaling or starting to journal, check out Gravity. Something fairly cool to explore. I think, like, for me, the idea
Appreciate that.
sounds great. I now I do journal actively, which is good. I found it very helpful. So I definitely would love to try out Gravity and see. I think one of the biggest advantages, I'd love to understand, like, so one of the things that we didn't touch upon right now, right, is like we talked about your active meditation, your journaling. Is there a feedback or is there a loop here as well, right? Like, are you going back and revisiting old posts? Are you, how is it that you are making sure that what they have even written down, because yes, that's a reflection, but like you said, that's a reflection in the moment. How do you know you're not just closing that and walking away like a normal journal? What
Yeah,
are you leveraging that for later is kind of where I'm asking.
totally. Um, it's so funny because when we did user interviews, the majority consensus was that people don't revisit their past journals, whether handwritten or digitally, and it makes sense. There's a lot of friction to do that. The need to do that may not be so clear unless there is like a high urgency to do that. So it made a lot of sense. But one of the things that I think is important is there's so much wisdom that you collect when you write and that you store away in these journals that just sit on a shelf or in an app. And I think it's really helpful to look back on those. It's kind of like looking back on your old photos. It induces nostalgia, which is a really powerful emotion. But also, um, a lot of the problems that we experience in life are repetitive. Like history deletes itself, then it repeats itself, and I think that applies to humans as well. So on Gravity, we have a really simple feature. It's called Memories, where if you click on Memories, we will transport you back to one of your old past journals. And it's such a simple feature. Like you could do that on your own. You could just go to where all your journals live, like swipe, close your eyes, and click on a random one. But the problem is people don't do that because there's no need to. But
Yeah.
we create this feature just so that there's a place for people to do that, and it feels like a practice of doing that. And so every Sunday we send our users a notification to revisit their memories, and they'll take them to that feature, transport them back to an old journal entry that they've written. And yeah, I'd say the value of journaling is really front loaded. Like a lot of it happens when you're doing it in the moment.
Yeah.
But when AI comes into the picture and there's more insights that we can derive from things, that feedback loop tightens and it becomes a lot more impactful. So yeah, right now we have a very simple feature, but once we get to V2, I think that becomes a lot more powerful.
Awesome. Last point from my side here, because I know we got to wrap it up soon,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because the way that we're talking about it and with AI understanding all of your previous journals and having that wisdom for you, we even alluded to the fact that like it becomes almost like a therapist for you. At
Mm-hmm.
what point, and I'm just curious, how do you balance the knowledge expertise of your AI or your LLM in that sense, right? Like, is it that you are going to want to at some point drive it with knowledge professionals who are therapists up there and build it that way because keeping in mind it's heading that way, or are you more keeping it for a self-reflection, my own thing, and not diversify into that sort of area?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point because it's so prevalent in the space right now. All the greats, the Headspace, Comms, they've integrated with health service providers, clinical applications, where they match it to therapists. And there's a reason for that because I think these tools live better when they're in synergy with one another. So you have a therapy practice, but then you also have a self-regulation practice.
Correct.
And as of today, most of them don't talk to each other in the highest fidelity sense, meaning, what you're journaling on Gravity may not directly be communicated to your therapist unless you share that with them. And so the bridge that AI allows us to, the capabilities that it introduces is that feedback loop is tightened. So you can journal on Gravity, and then your therapist can get a summary of it, or when you go to your next session, they have a better idea of how you've been feeling and sort of like what's on your mind lately, and so simply put, I think that bridge will need to happen. Like Gravity will probably exist best when it has clinical partners, whether that's in-house or sort of external. But
Yeah.
we want to provide an end-to-end mindfulness experience. And right now we're focused, like you said, on the single player game, and we're gonna try to build that out to the best it could be. And then as we try to expand the aperture, we're going to build the entire experience and connect people to clinical help if they need that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I can't wait to see, where Gravity goes. I know it's a long journey ahead, but super excited at least for the launch that's upcoming and to check it out. Thank you so much for your time today. Really quick, in case anybody has any other lingering questions, feel free to share it in the chat. I'll give that like 30 seconds to a minute. And if not, then, it's been an absolute pleasure, Malhar. I am looking forward to seeing how this grows, and I'm looking forward to our next chat as well, so that we can see how we've both evolved, where we've evolved, and what's going on.
Yeah, we'll do a progress check-in. But no, I appreciate this. Thanks so much, Advi, and thank you all for the amazing questions.
Amazing. Thank you all for attending. If you have any other questions, feel free obviously to reach out to me or Malhar on LinkedIn. And in case you're interested, please also check out Gravity. And yeah, looking forward to our next webinar session. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.